The professionals building the strongest practices today are quietly building media companies around their expertise. I'm Sylvia Garibaldi, founder and CEO of a well-established marketing training and done-for-you services company, tailored specifically for the modern legal and financial professional worldwide. While it's taken some trial and error to figure out which methods get the best results for professionals who are looking to grow their practices, fast forward to today, my team and I have nailed down and perfected a process that has helped so many of our clients consistently achieve outstanding results and create a legacy for their practices. I created the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast to give you simple, actionable, non-salesy, and results-driven marketing to grow your legal or financial practice like so many of our clients have. If you're a lawyer, mediator, financial, or divorce professional who is looking to become highly visible and wants to create a practice that makes an impact, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 123 of the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast. I'm your host, Sylvia Garibaldi. So I've been thinking a lot lately about something that I honestly don't hear many people talking about in the legal, mediation, and divorce-related professions. And quite honestly, I think it's one of the biggest shifts happening right now. The professionals building the strongest practices today are quietly building media companies around their expertise. So let me explain. And I don't mean media companies in the Hollywood sense. I mean they are consistently creating marketing assets such as podcasts, webinars and workshops, newsletters, or a book or guide of some kind. And over time, those things begin creating something much bigger than marketing. They're actually creating trust at scale, familiarity at scale, and authority at scale. And what happens is this long-term visibility compounds year after year. And this is one of the deepest shifts happening right now in professional services. Because for decades, what we've been seeing is that many professionals have built their practices primarily through referrals, reputation, networking, local visibility, right? And so those things still matter enormously. But today, something different is happening. People increasingly want to hear how you think, observe how you communicate, learn from your ideas, watch how you educate, and experience your expertise long before they ever contact you. And I think this is a very different environment than it was 10 years ago. And I think the professionals understanding this shift early enough are the ones that are creating enormous advantages for themselves over the next decade. And in fact, we've been observing this for a while now, and we do see that those professionals that are much further ahead than their peers do have some kind of marketing asset in their systems. And so I think it's important to note that when you notice that those professionals that are doing extremely well, they will have one of these marketing assets, or they can have multiple of these marketing assets. So this is what we're talking about today. And as I said, it's not talked about much because not very many people are realizing that this is a thing. Marketing assets are a thing, and those ones that I've referred to are very powerful ones. So what basically happens is when these marketing assets come together, they are creating a trust ecosystem and, quite frankly, a relationship building system as well. But more importantly, with AI in the mix, what's happening is it becomes a searchable body of expertise that keeps working long after it's been created. And so that's why I think it's such a powerful shift. So over time, those professionals are quietly building those educational ecosystems, those audiences, and those authority libraries. And over time, this becomes very difficult to compete against. So this is why I'm really excited to talk about this. So let's dive in. So for a very long time, the model was pretty straightforward. You built relationships, you did great work, you developed a reputation, and those referrals followed. this model still works to a certain degree. However, what's changed is what happens after the referral. Because now, even when someone is referred to you, they are still Googling you. They're checking your LinkedIn. They're reviewing your website. They're looking at your content. They're comparing you to other professionals and increasingly using AI tools to research your expertise and credibility. And this is where many professionals are running into a problem because they may have decades of experience, incredible expertise, and outstanding client work, but very little visible authority infrastructure online. Meanwhile, those professionals that are building what we call a massive digital trust footprint, they are doing this through podcasts, webinars or workshops, newsletters, or a book or guide of some kind of consistent thought leadership. And so over time, the advantage here is that those assets compound. Okay, I hope you're getting where I'm going with this. So I think this is where authority assets start changing everything, because one of the biggest misconceptions professionals have is thinking that these activities or these assets are separate activities. So a podcast feels separate, a webinar feels separate, a newsletter, that book or guide. But in reality, they're actually all connected. And together, they begin creating something much bigger than most professionals realize, because a podcast isn't just a podcast, right? A podcast becomes a relationship building tool, a trust building tool, a networking tool, a referral building tool. And as I said, it's a searchable body of expertise that keeps working for you long after that last episode is recorded. Okay, I hope that's making sense. Same thing happens with webinars or workshops that are ongoing, right? These aren't just a presentation. They are a lead nurturing tool. They are a trust accelerator, and they are an authority positioning asset. Same rings true for newsletters. It's not just an email. It actually keeps you top of mind, visible, and familiar before they actually need you. So these authority assets really begin compounding together. And quite frankly, all of these things are interconnected. So one podcast episode can become multiple LinkedIn posts, newsletter content. It could become your webinar discussions or your workshop materials. It can become referral partner conversations, short video clips, educational guides or books, right? Some people will use this content and create a book from it. So one idea can become an entire authority ecosystem. And that's the deeper strategy here. And so I think professionals doing this really well, and we have been observing them, they are no longer simply marketing. They're building what I would call intellectual property around their expertise. So they are building educational ecosystems. They are building long-term trust infrastructure. And this is happening very powerfully in family law, estate planning law, in mediation, in collaborative practice, in divorce services. It's all there. You see it in divorce coaching. You see it in divorce financial planning work, workplace mediation. And this is how they are creating this digital footprint because, people aren't making casual decisions anymore. They are making decisions that we know have a huge impact on their life or their work or their businesses. And in those moments, people are looking for that educational content. They're looking for someone that is familiar, that is calm, someone that they trust. And so the ones that are quietly building audiences, authority, libraries, educational ecosystems, they're actually building this long-term trust at scale. And I think that's what makes a huge difference. So I think this leads to another really important question. Why are these authority assets becoming so powerful right now? So, for example, why are podcasts, webinars, newsletters, books, and guides, why are they suddenly having a major impact on professional practices? And I think the answer is pretty simple. These assets create trust before the consultation ever happens. And with the power of AI now, it's making it faster and simpler to get these marketing assets out to your audiences. That's the real shift. And so in today's high trust professions, people are looking to you as a guide, as a professional, as a communicator, as a problem solver to help them in these situations. So this is why it's becoming increasingly important to develop these assets, because we're seeing that people are overwhelmed, they're emotionally exhausted, and they are feeling uncertain, fearful, stressed, or navigating some major life transitions. This is why it's important to build these marketing assets at scale now. And that's what makes them so powerful, because when someone listens to your podcast, they begin hearing how you think, how you explain things, how you communicate. Like, is this easy to understand, or is this too difficult for me to even grasp? And that comes to how you handle complexity. And remember the saying, a confused buyer will never buy. And so your philosophy is what becomes important for them. So when someone attends your next webinar or workshop series, they begin experiencing your professionalism, your teaching style, your approach, your energy. And they get to understand, hey, would I want to work with this person? Do I get what they're saying? Would they be somebody that could get me the results that I'm looking for? So when someone reads your newsletter consistently, you become very familiar to them over months, over years, and that familiarity creates something incredibly valuable. And that's trust before contact. I honestly think that this is one of the biggest reasons why some professionals are growing much faster than others right now, because many professionals are still relying almost entirely on direct interaction to build trust. Meanwhile, others are building trust continuously in the background through these educational ecosystems. The interesting part here is that much of this trust building happens quietly. Someone listens to your podcast for 6 months. They read your newsletter. They consistently attend your webinars and workshops. They're following your LinkedIn content, or they're consistently following your YouTube channel. They are watching your interviews, and they never engage publicly once, right? But when they finally need help, you're already familiar to them and you already feel trusted. And I think that's what changes the entire dynamic of professional growth, because now you're no longer introducing yourself from zero every time. I hope that's resonating with you. Your authority assets have already been doing part of the relationship building for you long before the consultation ever begins. And I think this is one of the biggest hidden advantages in professional services today. Okay, if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, I know I need to build authority around my expertise, but I'm not sure how to actually structure it, this is exactly the type of work that we help professionals think through at SG and Associates, because podcasts, webinars, newsletters, books, and guides, they become powerful when they are built intentionally to work together. And that's how authority compounds. And honestly, I think we're still very early in this shift, which means there is still huge opportunity for professionals just like you who want to start building these authority assets right now. So I invite you to book a strategy call with me. And on this call, we're going to look at what you're actually doing right now, where the gaps are, and what it would take to build an authority building system for you in your own practice. So if this is you and you're interested, you can book a strategy call. Please find the link in the show notes. So when I step back and look at the professionals building the strongest authority right now, I keep seeing the same 4 assets appear over and over again. And these are not random. These are consistently done. And I think that these 4 authority assets are quietly becoming some of the biggest competitive advantages in professional services today. The first is podcasts. The second is webinars and workshops. The third, newsletters. And the fourth are books or guides, ebooks as well, or some kind of long-form thought leadership. And what's important here is that these assets are different from short-term visibility because they create long-term trust, and that's the key distinction here. All right, so let's start with podcasts. I honestly believe that podcasts are one of the most powerful authority assets available today for trust-based professionals, because trust builds differently through audio. And now we are moving into video as well for podcasts, but primarily audio still wins. And when someone listens to your voice regularly, something very different happens psychologically. They begin hearing how you think, how you explain things, how you communicate, and how you handle complexity or how you can get them to understand what you are saying in a way that makes sense to them. And that's incredibly powerful in professions like yours, in law, mediation, and divorce services, because people are trying to determine, do I trust this person? And podcasts help answer that question before the consultation ever happens. The other thing podcasts do extremely well is that it creates that long form familiarity. Someone may spend 20, 30 minutes, even an hour listening to your ideas over time. And that creates a very different relationship than someone casually scrolling past your online post. I want to share something with you that I see come up time and time again. Many professionals I speak to know exactly who they want to attract, but where things break down isn't clarity, it's actually implementation. So they're not sure how to translate that into messaging, how to stay visible, or how to turn that visibility into actual client inquiries. So if this sounds familiar, I created a step-by-step guide to help you work right through this. This free guide walks you through how to define your ideal clients, identify the right referral partners, understand where they're actually looking, including AI, and most importantly, how to turn all of that into consistent action. You can download your free guide at www.sgandassociates.ca/free-guide. Link is also in the show notes. For example. And I can tell you quite honestly, I get notes from people that tell me where and how they've been listening to my podcast, right? Either it's after their swim in the ocean or while they are commuting to work, or whether it's them dropping their kids off to their sports and listening to me on the sports field. There have been so many different variations of really warm stories that people have shared with me. And quite frankly, this is what helps build that relationship more powerfully. Okay, let's talk about webinars and workshops. This is another authority asset that I think is becoming incredibly powerful. And I think webinars are one of the fastest ways to build trust at scale. And if you've been following my work, you will see that the first authority asset that I mentioned, podcasts. The second authority assets, workshops and webinars. Those are two things that we're doing consistently here at SG & Associates because people no longer passively consume content. They are actively learning from you in real time. And so what a webinar does is it allows for people to experience your educational approach and your thinking process live. Here's something else that happens. They listen to you answer people's questions live, which gives you an opportunity to see how they problem solve and how you can relate to the same problems that other people on the call are experiencing. Enormously powerful in high trust professions. So webinars help communicate all of this very quickly and help build that authority. Newsletters. This is another marketing asset that we use at SG & Associates. It is a powerful one because newsletters do something social media really can't do consistently. They allow professionals to remain connected to people over long periods of time. And that's especially important in your field in family law, estate planning law, mediation, collaborative law, divorce coaching, workplace mediation, divorce financial planning, you name it. All of these areas are really, really important. People observe first. And as I said, sometimes for months, sometimes even years. And newsletters allow professionals to remain top of mind in an educational sense, right? And so I think that's super, super important. And newsletters are even more important right now because professionals are starting to realize that relying entirely on the algorithm for social media platforms can be risky. All right, let's turn to the fourth authority asset I think that carries enormous weight is books, guides, and long-form thought leadership because published educational thinking creates credibility very quickly. Even a well-written guide can shift how a professional is perceived. At SG & Associates, we have long-term guides that people sign up for and other authority assets that we are currently working on. So it demonstrates structure, expertise, philosophy. And once again, it shows people how you think and how you educate. And here's another important tip. In the world of AI and in the world of marketing, we are seeing a shift from short form content to long form thought leadership. It's going to be important for you to start engaging in more long form thought leadership. So here's what I think is really important to understand here. These 4 authority assets that I've just explained to you, they become exponentially more powerful when they work together. The podcast feeds the webinar feeds the newsletter feeds the guide creates speaking opportunities. And so the speaking grows the audience grows the authority, and over time, this becomes a very powerful ecosystem around a professional practice. And this is something that we are seeing. This is something that we have been observing for a while. And I thought it was important for me to share this episode with you so that you are aware of how this is working right now. So I want to turn now to where many professionals misunderstand how authority is actually built, because obviously it's not built in one big moment. It's usually built through repeated exposure over time. Consistency has become one of the most underrated competitive advantages in professional services. Not because consistency is exciting, but because consistency communicates something very important psychologically. It communicates stability, professionalism, reliability. They know you're in this for the long run, right? You're not here today and then you're going to disappear next week with a different positioning or a different target audience that you're going after. They're looking for long-term presence, for seriousness. So it's important when you're looking at professionals and you're looking at their ability to communicate consistently in the same vein is absolutely important. I can't tell you how many professionals I see that are shifting their positioning and moving from this market to that market. Now they're an expert in business development, or now they're an expert in mediation. So, looking at that and saying, how did this transition take place? And do these authority assets support this transition? That's absolutely important to make sure that that's happening. So I think it's important to really look at what this is saying. Consistently, but not perfectly, is where we're heading. Because there are professionals that we see every day that are still approaching visibility in bursts. So they publish heavily for a few weeks, then they disappear. They return months later and they disappear again. But trust usually doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't compound that way. Trust compounds through repeated familiarity. And so this is when someone sees your podcast repeatedly, consistently. So you're not creating one episode this week and then the next one 2 months from now or 6 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. It's consistent. It's every week or it's every 2 weeks. So your newsletter, same thing, repeatedly on a schedule. Your webinars and workshops, repeatedly on a schedule. When this happens over time, you start becoming mentally associated with your area of expertise. And I think that's when authority really starts forming. And what's interesting, I think, is that much of this happens quietly in the background. Most people observing your content are not commenting, liking, engaging publicly, or announcing that they are paying attention. But they are watching, they are observing. They are observing a few key things: how consistently you show up, what you talk about, how you communicate, and whether your presence feels established over time. I hope this is making sense, because this is one of the biggest reasons professionals quit way too early. Because authority building often feels slow in the beginning, and what they don't realize is that they are building familiarity, and that familiarity compounds. And so those referral partners start to remember you. They reach out to you. Those podcast listeners recognize your name. Those webinar attendees have been attending your workshops for a while now before they actually buy. Professionals begin associating you with that specific expertise, and opportunities begin emerging from that accumulated trust in ways you may have never, ever expected. And I honestly think this is where many professionals underestimate the power of consistency. And if you've been following my work, I talk a lot about consistency. So I honestly think we are still very early in this shift, especially in the space that you work in. And when I look across these industries, many professionals are still old school. They're still relying entirely on referrals. They may have very limited educational content online. They may be publishing inconsistently or have no authority infrastructure built around their expertise. And I think that this creates enormous opportunity right now. That's the part many professionals underestimate. A podcast episode compounds, a webinar compounds, a newsletter compounds, and a book becomes that compounding factor over time, and it becomes searchable over time. So when the timing is right, people will remember you. And I think this is why professionals suddenly appear to take off, if you will. But usually what people are seeing is not sudden growth. They haven't seen you building this in the background quietly. So this is what years of educational visibility, consistency, authority building, and relationship building compounding together, this is how it works. And it builds over time. For some people, it's over months. For others, it may take a bit longer, but I can tell you one thing for certain. It does build month over month, and you will notice a huge difference. So this is also why professionals who begin building authority assets now are likely creating enormous advantages for themselves over the next year, 2 years, 4 years, and even 20 years. Because the longer someone consistently builds these assets, the harder they become to compete against. Let that set in for a moment, okay? So the longer someone builds consistently these assets, these 4 assets I've shared with you, the much more challenging it becomes for their competitors to actually compete against them. This is the power of authority assets. And this is why I felt compelled to share this episode with you, because this is something that we are seeing that is growing consistently over time. And many professionals, as I said, are still underestimating how important this will become in the future. But I'm glad that you subscribe to this podcast and you listen consistently, because I want to make sure that you too have the competitive advantage and you are aware of where we are heading with this trend, especially as AI-driven discovery continues to grow significantly. Online trust footprints become more important than ever, and clients increasingly researching professionals long before making contact. So I think this is very much a trend that is not being talked about enough in professional services. But as I said, it's happening quietly. The professionals who are building these assets, podcasts, webinars and workshops, newsletters, books and guides, they are creating very different types of practices than we saw even 10 years ago. And the interesting part is this. Many of the professionals already doing this are much further ahead because authority compounds, trust compounds, and as I said, familiarity compounds. And I think we're moving into a world where the professionals who consistently educate, communicate, and build these authority assets around their expertise, they will become, and they are the most trusted voices in their space. So, if you're a professional listening to this episode, take this as your opportunity, because you're still early enough in this shift, and there is enormous room to build authority in the legal space, in the mediation and ADR spaces, in divorce services. And so the professionals who recognize this shift now and actually start building these assets intentionally, they are likely going to lead the next generation of trusted professional brands in this space. And I know that this could be you too. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes packed with actionable strategies to grow your practice. See you in the next episode.